This is Real Estate 360. I'm your host, Steve Vazza. I have the pleasure of having Jim Dunphy from South Shore Bank. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned to you, I have a long history with South Shore Bank. Haven't had the pleasure of meeting you. I know a lot of your colleagues over at the bank, and over the past several years and years beyond, you guys have really sort of been on the South Shore in all points, east and west and north and south. And there have been great things happening over at South Shore Bank.
There sure have. Most should know we just recently completed the merger with Braintree Cooperative Bank. It closed in October, and this past February we've completed the system conversion. We're thrilled to be in Braintree in a strong sense and bringing that team over. And everything's gone really well.
Yeah. Well, in the world of banking, there have been a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Why Braintree in particular? Why Braintree Co-op?
One, we really liked the marketplace in Braintree. We had a small operation there, and if we're going to be South Shore Bank, Braintree being one of the key communities, we wanted a better presence there, and we really liked the people that came with the bank. From the board of directors all the way through, they have a great following with their clients, strong presence, and so we continue to maintain that and really enjoy having them with us.
Yeah. Well, you and I were talking, before we were on set here, and there's a lot of competition in the banking industry right now. I mean, especially in the Boston market. We all know that real estate in particular, and we'll talk about some of the other products that you do over at South Shore Bank. But real estate right now is such a hot commodity. I know as a real estate developer that it's actually a very favorable time to be a borrower for a change.
It sure is. We certainly in the whole New England area don't lack for competition in the banking arena. That's why you'll continue to see some consolidation and some mergers come through. For many years, there's been significant margin compression with the lower rates, which, as you said, is good for borrowers. Even with the tick up, they're still relatively low. There's been tremendous regulatory burdens put on the banks. That we're dealing with.
And do you see those easing?
They've eased a little bit, and more we get, we've become accustomed to them.
Right.
And one of the things I see right now that's the other burden right now for banks and trying to keep the overhead structure is technology.
Yes.
And technology moves so fast. Any of our clients want to make sure that they have the most innovative and up-to-date technology out there. And they don't often think about what it takes to make that safe and secure. So there's a lot of fintech type activity coming in, but it doesn't need the same security features that a bank does. And it's your money and you want it to be safe.
Yeah. Well, when I think of banks on the South Shore, and certainly I know other large institutions like yourselves, but I really think of South Shore Bank as one of the premier institutions in the banking on the South Shore, and as you and I were talking about earlier, and you go well beyond that. But as an institution on the South Shore, you guys have been down there as long as I can ever remember.
I couldn't agree with you more. We look at ourselves as a premier bank, and really having people out in the streets, in the communities, being able to interact with our clients, making decisions, that you have access to top decision makers like myself and all through the organization, and we want to continue that.
Yeah, and where do you see the market? I mean, I talk to people all the time, as certainly do you. I personally, I'm I'm optimistic by nature. I'm optimistic in business, and I think that with the reports that are out from the GDP and the unemployment rate and whatnot, I see tremendous tailwinds and great opportunities ahead. What's your perspective from in the banking industry?
So as bankers, you generally are conservative by nature.
For sure.
And you're always waiting for that cycle. The cycle has been quite long right now. And so traditionally you would think something would have slowed it down by now. But I agree with you. Absorption rates and where everything's going, everything that seems to be built seems to get utilized very quickly.
That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, my personal experience in this particular cycle, and I'd like to think that you'd agree with me, is as a borrower, one thing that I've noticed, and obviously my perspective is real estate generally, but banks have been much more responsible this time around in their lending practices.
Sure. I think too, if you go all the way back to the late 80s, early 90s, when we had that recession, and that was a Texas and New England based problem, and then you roll forward to the Great Recession, and not that New England didn't have some of its problems during that, but I think we learned a lot from before, and both banks and developers and clients doing things have much more of a measured and reasonable approach to speculative building.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, it goes back to sort of the tech. We all joke about the days when people were getting stock tips from taxi drivers.
Right.
Okay, or you'd go and you'd.
I just got one from my barber the other day.
You did. Well, I hope it was a good one.
It was a Bitcoin related one.
Yeah, there you go.
I didn't buy.
You didn't buy. Yeah, smart man. A smart man. But in the last cycle, I'd go buy a development. Let's say it was a large condo development, and you'd ask who was doing it, and it would be like a group of doctors or something like that. And I just haven't seen that type of lending. The scrutiny by lenders as to who the developers and what the track record is this time around has been much more important in the underwriting process.
I agree, and we look at it because the cycle's been so long, and cap rates were very low, rental rates are very high. And so you are worried that there could be a shoe to drop, but we look at it, if we do it with the right people who've been through it, maintain the right amount of liquidity to carry through any downturn, it should be fine. But you're right, if you get the non-traditional developers or investors in, that's when we do get in trouble.
For sure. So sort of switching gears a little bit, I'm always intrigued by, I live on the South Shore, so I see your ads on TV all the time. And as I mentioned, I consider you, South Shore Bank to be, a formidable institution on the South Shore. You've been around a lot. But how do you stay relevant? How do you keep, depositors and, everyone, from, all the other guys, everybody wants those depositor accounts. How do you keep relevant and keep the name out there and participate in the community?
You know what? Every day we're looking at that. About 2 years ago, we actually invested in a new team at the bank, and it's strategic planning and business intelligence, and it's to manage that data. Back, when we all started doing anything, it was pretty easy to figure out where to advertise.
For sure.
The newspapers were thick, everyone read them, and then if you were doing well, you might jump to radio, and then if things were going well, or you wanted impact, you'd go to TV. So you had 3 sources. Now it's almost unlimited. You still have all those, but the newspaper isn't the same vehicle it used to be.
Social media.
Social media, and so what we're trying to do is figure out how to target individuals and companies that want the products we have to offer and get it to them. But it definitely is a challenge, and there's so many with social media and electronic means of communicating of where you have to be out there.
So right now you have deposits in the 1.3 billion range.
Correct.
Okay. Do you see additional acquisitions on the horizon? If that's something that we could talk about and disclose.
Sure. Yeah. So we're a mutual bank. We're proud of that. You talked about the history of the banks. Was incorporated back in 1833. I believe we're the 4th oldest bank in the state.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
So we have a great history and legacy to stay with. And as a mutual bank, we don't have shareholders, so there's no one. Some of these mergers happen when shareholders decide, hey, they've had enough and they want to cash out, which makes sense, and there's a terminal event. We don't have that in our world, so pulling them together is hard, in that it has to be that, because of, and the biggest thing is the talent, and especially now, it was lending talent and leadership and management talent, but now it's also the technology talent and the regulatory thing. So those costs are going up. So, like a bank like Braintree was a great bank, had good people, but they didn't have the size to compete and handle all that overhead.
It wasn't scalable.
So we were able to bring, the two of us together. And what I love is when you have institutions like that, you get some great people that have learned to wear many hats and do good things. But as hard as you try, you still have to have the dollars to spend on some of the technology. And you asked, how do we get in front of people? Well, that has a cost to it.
It sure does.
And so size is going to matter in the financial world. We would love to be able to put more of the institutions together, that are contiguous to us on the South Shore and maybe even a little out there. There's nothing in the works. One of the things is, in our field, we're always talking with each other.
Yep.
Everyone's always trying to do it. We have plenty of people who would like to be the surviving institution. Very few who are willing to have their institutions roll up.
Right. No, I understand. And you're certainly looking to grow, but not grow for the sake of growing.
Correct. There's certain areas or that you have that we just may not be good at. So we want to make sure that it's a place. And as I said, what we really, what's our differentiator is the fact that we have key people in those markets. And if we can't do that, the old build it, they will come. It does not happen in the banking world.
That's for sure. It doesn't happen in most things.
Right.
That's for sure. And you've been a big contributor to the South Shore community over the years. Yes. Everywhere I seem to go, you guys are promoting something or
we are
very active.
We generally, with dollars, it will often be right around 10% of our earnings each year we contribute in. We do have a foundation that we use. So it's in excess of $400,000 of actual dollars that we donate. And then the amount of time our people invest in. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure, and you need all different sizes of institutions, but the community banks, you can't be on any volunteer board, chambers and that without finding a group of bankers helping them out. They're your treasurers, volunteers, fundraisers, and doing a lot. So we certainly don't want to see that go away either. Yeah, no, you guys have had a tremendous footprint, and we were talking. So you venture well out of the South Shore, despite the name South Shore Bank. And sometimes you have to get the deals you want to do, and you follow your clients to where they're going. So obviously our primary footprint is South Shore, where we that is our name. But anything inside of 495 we look at as a key secondary market. We'll go into southern New Hampshire, even parts of Rhode Island.
Yeah. And like anything, we know that, as you mentioned, to really continue to grow. And somebody like myself, I like to bank with. Although we don't have a banking relationship right now,
we're going to solve that, though, right?
We're going to solve that. I have a lot of things I want to talk to you about, but it's very important for people that have businesses that go beyond a local region to have a lender that can travel with them, so to speak. And that's very important.
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's very important. And I know, certainly a lot of friends of mine who have businesses in multiple markets and whatnot, they enjoy business relationships with institutions like yourself that can travel with them, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. Jim, South Shore Bank is acquiring. You're always growing. You're a formidable adversary in the banking industry down here on the South Shore and points elsewhere. You've been an integral part of the South Shore community for over 100 years. I really appreciate you coming on the show. We'd love to have you back on, and we hope continued success with South Shore Bank.
Great, sounds good. I'd love to come back.
Thank you.